Okay, here we go. So today we're looking at a new writing support video, and today we're going to be focusing on the process of comparison and contrast writing. So let's get started and we will frame the C&C process. Okay, so obviously whenever you're looking at doing some sort of a writing project, you need to think about the steps involved. You need to be logical. You need to have a plan. So this is a guideline of the types of steps you might use to compose this type of paragraph. So obviously we're going to focus on similarities and differences, comparison and contrast. So obviously we're going to be looking at different types of writing that will be the source of our comparison here. So the very first step, of course, will be to reread those stories or poems and to try to pick out the literary elements from those poems and stories. So yeah, we can use the annotation process here. So while you're reading, you should be taking notes in the sidebar of the texts of the stories. You're trying to find those different literary elements that we've been learning about. So just a quick review. Window one would be the basic story elements, things like characters, conflicts, settings, those types of things, the climax, when it happens. Window number two, you're moving into some of our recycled elements. Those are wordplay elements. So did you notice examples of alliteration, simile, metaphor, personification, refrain? Also, we move into window three. That's going to be what we call our advanced features. So we learned about these recently. These are things like carpe diem, irony, the peripeteia or the turning moment, the shock or surprising moment in the story. And then finally, we move into the fourth window, which would be things like theme. In this fourth window, to expand, we also can add things like the author's voice. We can add things like the perspective of the story, like is it a first person story, a third person story? Those would live in that fourth window. So while you're reading, you should be annotating, taking notes, highlighting different sections, because later you might need them to help you support your comparison and contrast. So then once you've done your close reading, done your annotation, you will try to organize these similarities and differences. And we use a few different methods to do this. We can either use a T-chart, so that would be very simply, you just draw a line down the middle of your page and then a line across the top so it looks like a lowercase letter T. Then on one side you'd put the first story, on the other side you'd put the second story. You list all the similarities first and then all the differences second. Now, another option is the Venn diagram. So this would be where you do two big circles, and then you would have the story names also at the top. The part of the circles that don't touch would be the differences. The part of the circles that kind of where the two circles do overlap, that would be the similarities. And that would just help you to kind of visually organize what you discovered through your close reading. So the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make a list of all of our comparison and contrast cues. And what I like to do is I like to put them on post-it notes. So you have similarities on one post-it note, similarities on another post-it note, and you put them beside your computer. Similarities on the left, differences on the right. Then you have your linking tools directly, obviously there. Maybe you can hear my little kitty in the background. She doesn't like it when her papa goes to do work when I'm working from home for our asynchronous days. So she's kind of carrying on in the background. So just don't pay mind to that. She's just trying to be part of the process here. Okay, so then once you've moved through these steps, it's time to start actually writing. Now, as with any paragraph, our comparison and contrast paragraphs will need a clear topic sentence that kind of states what your purpose is. You'd probably include the names of the two works that you're doing the comparison and contrast with. So you might put down, like if you were going to pick the story Old Mossy and the Singing Bowls of Pokera, you'd put those names somewhere in your topic sentence. Okay, comparison and contrast structures. So this is a really important point to consider. There are two different main structures that we use for this type of paragraph. And obviously, there we go, two different ways to structure it. So method one, you will state all of your similarities and then all of your differences, or you could reverse the order. You could state all of your differences first and then all of your similarities. But the idea here is that you're putting them together in a grouping. So we call this the block structure, actually. And when we move into writing essays, there will be times when you can choose to write a comparison and contrast essay. If you use the block structure for comparison and contrast essays, it would become a 4-paragraph essay, right? You have your introduction paragraph, 1 paragraph dealing with all the similarities, 1 paragraph dealing with all the differences, and then your conclusion. Since today we're just talking about the paragraph level, it's very simple. You'd have your topic sentence, then the similarities, then the differences, and then a kind of wrap-up sentence. Okay, method number 2 is a little bit more involved. And what you're going to try to do in this case is you're going to try to look for 3 core themes that are represented within both of the works. But as those core themes develop, 2 or 3 of them usually, you notice that there are some similarities and differences within how those themes are delivered by the author, by the writer. So in this case, you would look at theme number 1, then you talk about the similarities and differences that you discovered there. Then you'd move into the second theme, again, talk about the similarities and differences. And then the third theme, similarities and differences. Then you'd have that same wrap-up sentence to close off the paragraph or to close off the essay. So if this was an essay, it would be 5 paragraphs, right? Your intro paragraph. Theme 1, talk about sims and diffs. Theme 2, sims and diffs. Theme 3, sims and diffs. And then your conclusion paragraph. So when you're trying to consider this, you have to look at how much information there is, and also can you tease out or discover 3 different unique kind of themes that all have similarities and differences weft into their delivery. Now, if you cannot find those 3 themes, obviously you're going to pick the block structure. It would make more sense. So you do have to look at what you have before you actually kind of dive into the writing process. Okay, so no animations to float things in slowly here. We've got the full list of our comparison and contrast cues just delivered. So we'll look at these quickly. So we've got linking tools for comparison. Similarly, on the same side, showing the same position. Additionally, in addition, moreover, so those 4, 5, and 6, you'll notice them from the Humtatania family, but they're useful to write about comparison and contrast too. So as we've learned, we always have different functions for obviously the same words. So you can see that these 4, 5, and 6, those can be used to start a sentence or they can be used in the middle of a sentence. That's generally true for most of these cues. So depending on how you write your sentences, you might put them into that academic formula. Okay, number 7, to parallel this concept. Number 8, in alignment. And number 9, convergently. So those 9 cues are used when we want to set up sentences that show points of similarity, or points of what we call comparison. So then over to the right-hand column, we've got linking tools that we can use for contrast. Contrastively, to contrast this, in contrast. On the other hand, opposingly, however, so that guy's also from our Humtatania family. In opposition to this, divergently, and to contrast this point. So number 1 and number 2 and number 9 are obviously fairly close, but what we're showing you is that, yeah, with a little bit of tweaking, we do have a fair bit of variety here. So we have 9 cues, both to show similarity and difference. Okay, moving on, we're going to obviously now look at an example. So let's imagine this is a very light example, just for the purpose of the demonstration video. Let's say we're going to compare chocolate against cheese. So we've done our brainstorming, and you can see we've come up with 3 similarities and 3 differences. Sim 1, they're both foods. Sim 2, they're both delicious. Sim 3, both have many varieties. Okay. Difference 1, chocolate, it comes from a plant, from the cocoa plant. Whereas diff 1 for cheese, it's animal-based. Diff 2, chocolate sweet. Now we put usually here, so we've kind of framed this a little bit because you can get bitter chocolate or unsweetened chocolate, but overall, generally, we consider it to be a sweet food. And with cheese, same, the tastes do range, but we generally find cheese to be salty. Difference number 3, the production is limited to 1 source, right? You can't really make chocolate without the cocoa bean. And then difference number 3, production can come from a range of different sources. So we can have cows, goats, and yeah, so cheese has a range of sources. All right, so then we would use these and then we would follow that kind of thinking process, our brainstorming process, and then we would use our cues and we would come up with a paragraph. So you can see I've kind of organized this is a block structure paragraph. So we look at the similarities first, the differences second. The similarities are highlighted in this yellow color. Differences are orange here. The initial sentence that's written in the white text is the intro sentence, and then the final sentence at the end, also marked by the white color, is the wrap-up sentence. So let's take a look at it. All food lovers know that chocolate and cheese are two luxurious treats. Furthermore, these two classic indulgences can be seen through their similarities and differences. So that would need to have an S on the end there, but that's why we do our drafting process and then give us a little bit of a rest and then read it again, what we call soak time, is because we'll find mistakes. So, but what we see is that topic sentence sets up the things we're looking at, and then it also frames the fact that we're going to be looking for similarities and differences. Okay, let's move into the next bit here. First, both of them are food products that take processing to prepare. Okay, perfect. Similarly, so there's one of our cues, both are sought after because they delight the tongue of epicures, young and old. Epicure is a vocabulary word that means a person who appreciates fine foods, just to let you know. Additionally, so there's another one of our cues. A third similarity is that both chocolate and cheese have a wide array of varieties, which shows their popularity. So we've got a which clause in there, everything's moving along nicely. Now we're going to transition into the differences. In terms of divergent, the most obvious is that chocolate is a sweet, while cheese tends to be salty on the palate. Second, chocolate is made from the cocoa plant. Opposingly, so there's an example of using that comparison or that contrast cue in the middle of the sentence. We're using our academic structure, but we've just plugged in the appropriate linking tool here. So opposingly, cheese comes from animal sources. Finally, humans have discovered one source for chocolate. On the other hand, cheese can be made from a range of animals. Ultimately, these two foods are enjoyed by many, even though they share points and differ from one another when investigated closely. So this is a fairly well-structured comparison and contrast block structure paragraph. Yeah, so this will be something we're going to ask you to do. Now, obviously, we're going to look at a more complex topic than chocolate and cheese, but for the purpose of this example demonstration, we needed to pick something where we could fit it in a fairly tight amount of space because we're doing it through a slideshow. All right, wonderful. So you can predict what's going to happen next. You're going to be asked to read the short stories that are part of week 4's contents, and then you're going to have to try to pick two, and then you're going to go through the exact processes that we've just laid out and write a comparison and contrast paragraph. Now, there will be support videos that look at how to do this for short stories because I'm going to be asking you to add citations. Good luck. We'll see you in our next face-to-face class.